Good morning, my YouTube viewers. Crystal here. This is Friday evening. I think it's 22 Jan 2020. And I wanted to make a video for you. I've been contemplating this video for a while now, thinking about should I make the video, shouldn't I? Well, this video isn't going to be about tarot, and it's not going to be about data science. It's going to be about something that I've been thinking about for a while. The title of the video is going to be Churches Are Not Safe Havens, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. And I wanted to discuss with you all of these instances when churches were not very good to me and other people. And basically, what I wanted to do was to illustrate to you that, we go to these spiritual events because we want to achieve spirituality, but a lot of times people are not necessarily spiritual. And even though this video I'm going to be talking about churches, I would just like to say that I had this friend, Colette, and I thought she was my best friend. And I found out that no, she wasn't my best friend. I found out no, that she was not my best friend at all. We were friends, and she broke up with me once when we were in the Netherlands, and she was in Germany. And then we got back together, and then we were friends. And then she broke up with me again, and I didn't hear from her for 14 years. And then 14 years later, this was around 2012, she contacted me and wanted us to be best friends again. And so we were talking on the phone every day for a month. And then she ditched me again. And she claimed to be spiritual. No, she's not spiritual. A spiritual person is not going to track somebody down on the internet just so they can renew their acquaintance and then ditch them again. That is not something that a spiritual person would do. And the thing is that although this video is going to be about churches, it's not necessarily churches. It's just that's where I have most of my experience. But it can be any religion. Any religion can do something like this, although I'm just talking about churches. So churches are not safe havens, but it could be any religion, not just Christian religion. And I'm not going to talk about any other religions because I don't want to get any hate mail and I don't want to get any strikes against me, because I know that there are certain religions and certain types of people that you're not allowed to talk about on YouTube, or you'll get a strike against you, or you'll get your channel taken down or something like that. So just to avoid all that, I'll just say it can be any religion, can be any place of worship, although I'm talking about churches because that's where I have most of my experience. So the first experience that I wanted to talk about was my mother. When we were children, we were going to this church called Olive Hill Baptist Church, and then my mom didn't want to go anymore, and she said that she didn't want to go because people were talking about her. And so she didn't go to church for a really long time. I know she's going to church now. She went to church with my stepdad, and I asked her why she started going to church again. And she said that she was going to church again because she knew that she was going to die and meet her maker. And so that's why she was going to church again. So I guess that's as good a reason as any, maybe I'll do that too. I'll get really religious towards the end of my life, because I know I'm going to die and meet my maker. So that's the first incident where people in the church were talking about my mother. Another incident, this is not me, this is somebody else. This is the Well Church in Whitley and Reading. And I was speaking to this lady called Tina, and she said that she was not going to go to the Well anymore because she went to the Well and people in the church reported her to social services and tried to get her children taken off of her. So that's another thing. And a lot of people don't realize this, but the churches are allowed to report people to social services. So that's something that people have to be very wary of. And I know that they're allowed to do that. And the reason why I know is because when I was sectioned the second time, this church that I was going to, St. Andrew's Church in Reading, they reported me to CMHT, that's Community Mental Health Team. And whenever I spoke to the pastor at Prospect Park Hospital, because I had been sectioned, he told me that they were allowed to do that. He said they were allowed to do that. So churches are not a safe haven. People with problems go to church because they think that they're going to get some respite from all their problems at church. And quite often, church is just going to give them some more problems. And even my boyfriend, he had an incident where people at church were talking about him. So the next incidents I had about people at church being nasty was about 20 years ago when I was going to the Quaker church in Reading. And this woman was really nasty to me. And I was so upset, I couldn't believe it, that I wrote a letter to the church telling them what happened. But then I just stopped going to the Quaker church after that. This woman was nasty to me. I was filing my nails, but it wasn't, enough to where people should be making a big deal out of it. And then this one woman suggested to me that I should go to another church. And they were just really nasty people. They just would suggest that you go to somewhere else. Maybe you can go to the Baptist church, or maybe, they didn't want me in that church. And they even suggested to me maybe I go to another church because they didn't want me there. And that was the Quaker church in Reading. So after I was sort of like invited to go to another church, I just decided I didn't want to go back to that church anymore anyway. So I stopped going. I stopped going to the Quaker church. And then I went to a Christian Science church in Reading, and nothing really major happened at the Christian Science church, but I just got the feeling I was harassed out of my job at Foster Wheeler at the time that I was going to the Christian Science church. And nobody did one thing in particular. But I don't know. I just felt like they had something to do with me being harassed out of my job. I mean, that may have been just how I felt, but that's just how I felt. So I stopped going. And then whenever I was harassed out of my job, I'd see them all over town. And I just sort of got the feeling that they were walking around all over town because they were trying to make it look like I was having a hallucination. But at the same time, I saw this guy with red hair all over town too. And because I had been harassed out of my job, and my former employer, Foster Wheeler, had spread it all around that I was mentally ill, I was so traumatized and terrorized that I just felt that they were doing it on purpose, that they were trying to make it look like I was having a hallucination. I mean, it may have just been a coincidence, but that's how I felt. So, and then the next incident we had, this was at St. John's Church, and it's on Orts Road in Reading. This was close to 20 years ago, about 17 years ago. There was this lady called Suzanne, and she was a curate at the church. And another woman called Ina, who since died from cancer, was trying to get a hold of me. And Suzanne, who was a curate at the church, told her not to bother me because I wasn't well. Well, I needed friends. I needed someone to talk to. I needed a friend. And this woman, who was a curate at the church, spread it around all over East Reading that I wasn't well. That I wasn't well. And don't bother me. So here I am sitting in my apartment all alone, wanting some company, wanting some friendship. And a curate in a church is telling people don't bother me. You know, I'm not well. This was a curate at St. John's Church on Orts Road that did that. And I had been her friend on Facebook, and I unfriended her on Facebook when I found out what she had done. And she's like morbidly obese, and I think that she did that out of jealousy. I think that she was telling people, spreading it around all over East Reading, that I'm not well. I think she said that out of jealousy. So we've got St. John's out of the way. And then after I got sectioned and I was given this diagnosis of paranoid delusional disorder, because I wasn't believed, because I was harassed out of my job at Foster Wheeler, and I do believe it was financially motivated, and I do believe that they got my friends and family involved in it. I was given a diagnosis of paranoid delusional disorder. I started going to St. Andrew's Church in Reading, and it was the same thing. They were really nice to me at first. And then they stopped being nice to me. They stopped being nice to me, and then my flat was vandalized. I'm not going to discuss all the things that they did, well, when my flat was vandalized, because I don't want to give anybody any ideas, except to say that it's pretty much a given that it was the neighbors doing it, and it wasn't just one neighbor, it was a group of neighbors. And one of the neighbors involved, I'll just call her Kat, she apologized to me for her behavior. Well, she shouldn't be apologizing to me. She should be telling the police what she's done and who she's done it with, because I've lost all credibility. You know, now that I've been given a diagnosis of a mental illness, that I'm not listened to. I'm not listened to at all. So it doesn't do any good for her to apologize to me, because I'm not going to turn the other cheek. You know, if I ever get evidence of what these people have done, I'm going to take it to the appropriate authorities, because I want justice, and I'm not going to turn the other cheek. So maybe I'm not a suitable person to be going to church anyway if I'm not going to turn the other cheek. And but yeah, it was pretty much given that the neighbors were doing this, but I think that other people were involved as well, and I think that it was financially motivated. It was all very dubious, and I kept a record of everything that happened, and I was very scared, because like when you are being terrorized and you know that people want to harm you and the police are not doing anything about it, it's very scary indeed. And then so, yeah, the people at St. Andrew's Church, they were nice to me, and then they stopped being nice to me, and they started saying mean things to me. So I started going to the church. I wrote the church a letter telling them why I wasn't going to the church. One of the things they did, the vicar came to my house at 9 o'clock at night, and I was in my nightgown, and believe me, you know, pretty soon I'm going to be in my 7th decade on this planet. So believe me, I don't look very good with no clothes on. And I was in my nightgown when he came in, and I couldn't let him in because I don't even have a place to entertain people. All I have is a bedroom and a kitchen. I don't have a living room or a sitting room or anything like that. And so I was really scared that he came to my house at 9 o'clock at night when I was in my nightgown. And believe me, you know, people would pay me to put my clothes back on. You know, they don't want to see me with no clothes on. And I couldn't let him in. And so I wrote a letter to the church telling them all the reasons why I wasn't going to the church anymore. And then I mentioned that he came to my house at 9 o'clock at night, and this neighbor downstairs let him in. And yeah, they reported me to CMHT, Community Mental Health Team, and I wasn't listened to. I didn't even find out that this church had turned me in to CMHT until I appealed the section. And then when I appealed the section, then I found out the things that people were saying about me. And this church was saying things about me. And they said that I was in the church being delusional. Well, I wasn't being delusional. My flat had been vandalized. People were coming up into the building in the middle of the night and breaking things. So no, I wasn't being delusional. I was being terrorized, and I got no support from anybody. But they wanted to justify that why they were reporting me to CMHT. So they said that I was sitting in the church being delusional, and they lied and said that this pastor came to my house at 8 o'clock at night, and he didn't come to my house at 8 o'clock at night. He came to my house at 9 o'clock at night, and I was in my nightgown, and one of the things that he asked me was if I was working, and I said yes. And I'm going to tell you something. The guy right across from me died in my flat, and he lay in his flat for weeks before the police had come knock the door down. And so, this guy came to my house unannounced. He could have done anything. And there was actually something in the news when I was in Prospect Park Hospital about these people from the church killing people for money. So my fears are not unfounded. It may sound paranoid, but my fears are not unfounded. I'm not just making all this stuff up out of thin air. All these things really do happen. It really did happen that there was in the news this church, this curate, and these people in the church were befriending the parishioners and getting them to put them in their will. And then so when the people died, then the church or the people in the church got the inheritance. And there was an incident, I think he was a groundskeeper or something like that of this church, and he had developed a romantic liaison with a very old parishioner, and he had been gaslighting this guy and drugging this guy for a very long time. So this guy was out of it most of the time, and he actually smothered him to death so he could get the inheritance. So, yeah, you may think, oh, well, she's just delusional. But those kind of things really do happen. And so this pastor came to my house at 9 o'clock at night when I was in my nightgown. My boyfriend was asleep. And he lied and said that he came at 8 o'clock at night when he didn't. It wasn't 8 o'clock at night. It was 9 o'clock at night. And I was scared. So, yeah, and then I found out when I got sectioned the second time, because of this church reporting me to CMHT, and they gave me another diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder. And the reason why is because I'm not believed. My flat was vandalized repeatedly. My boyfriend was here when my flat was vandalized, so he knows the flat was vandalized. He agrees with me the flat was vandalized, but I wasn't believed. And because I wasn't believed, they gave me this diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder. So now we've talked about St. Andrew's Church. I'm not going there anymore. Now the next church we're going to talk about is Wycliffe. We were going to Wycliffe Baptist Church, and one time we went over to some people's house for lunch and had a lovely lunch. But this lady was asking me, was I taking my medication? And I said, oh, yes, of course I'm taking my medication. You have to say that you're taking your medication, because if you don't say that you're taking your medication, they can report you to CMHT. And then, so we started going to the food handouts to try to save money, because I only work 14 hours a week, and I get ESA, and I don't get any housing benefit. So I have to save every single penny. And my boyfriend sort of like lost his job basically, or he lost a lot of work. If he didn't lose his job altogether, he lost a lot of work. And so we've been going to these food handouts. So we were going to the food handout at Wycliffe Baptist Church. And this lady, I'm not going to say her real name. I'll just say her name is Kay. And if you watched my videos on tarot, then you'll notice that I kept getting the queens. And I kept thinking, who is this queen? Who is this queen? Well, I think that queen was Kay. And she never would say hello to me. Or if she did say hello to me, she was very rude and abrupt and everything like that. And then one time there was an incident with this woman that basically she would say she really didn't want people to come to the food handouts the 4 days a week that they were open because she couldn't deal with the stress of it all. She wanted them to come like maybe once a week. That's what she wanted. She wanted people to come to the food handouts once a week because she couldn't deal with the stress of it all. And then, so I just asked, you go to the table and they say you can have 1 piece or 2 pieces. So this lady said you can have 1 piece. And I said, oh, well, can I have the fish then? She told me I could have 1 piece, and I asked if I could have the fish. And then she said, well, weren't you the one that had the salmon? And I couldn't think quickly enough to say, well, no, I didn't. And then she took all the food, and she took it all away from her and held it up close to her. And I said, does that mean I can't have it? And she goes, give it to someone else. I was shocked. Can you just absolutely believe that you're at a food handout and a volunteer behaves like that? So I was so upset. I was shocked. I was so upset that I texted this Kay and told her what happened, and Kay covered it up. She covered it up. And the next day I was still really upset. So my boyfriend texted her and told her that he was very upset, that this woman really needed to be spoken to. And then she gave my boyfriend a snotty text message too. And so on the following Saturday, I was really upset. So I put something on the Cemetery Junction Facebook page, and she didn't like that because she wants it covered up. She wants to keep quiet everything that happens at that food share. And another thing that happens at that food share is she gives the food to the volunteers. Like was one of the last people that got the food because the volunteers would get their pick of the food, and then she'd give the food to the families, and then she'd give the food to the single mothers, and then I would be one of the last people to even get any food at all because they were giving food to the families before they were giving food to single people. And they were giving food to single mothers before they were giving food to single people. And so she gave all the food to the volunteers and the families and the single mothers. And then by the time it came to me, well, there wasn't much food left anyway. And so, and I know this because she was standing outside talking about it. And one time she was talking about this nut roast and about how good it was. And I was thinking to myself, well, I would have liked to have had some of that nut roast. And I was never offered any nut roast, and I would have liked it. It sounded really good. It sounded delicious, you know. And she kept that nut roast for herself and her friends. She wasn't going to let any of the people who go to the handouts get it. And then, so what caused this rift was after this volunteer was really nasty. It was unbelievable. You just can't believe a volunteer would act like that. I texted her and I said, is it okay if my boyfriend comes in with me to the food share as a chaperone? Well, she said no, he couldn't. And she said that she was going to show the operations manager my text messages. Well, I didn't know it at the time, but she was just trying to cause trouble. She was trying to get me sectioned again, section number 3. And I said, well, I don't want any more trouble. I'm not going to speak to the operations manager, but my boyfriend might speak to him if that woman is rude to him. And I found out later that this woman, I didn't even know who she was at the time. She had been going into the warehouse. Well, the warehouse was like a church. She had been going into the warehouse and she'd been telling people that she would look in my direction and she would say, she's mentally unstable. She didn't have to say my name. And she was going into the warehouse telling people I was mentally unstable. So I wasn't even given a chance. The thing is if you believe someone to be mentally unstable, then why do you do things to bring out that mental instability? So she obviously had told all the volunteers that I was mentally unstable. And this volunteer decided she was going to be nasty to me. But that's it. If you believe somebody to be mentally unstable, why are you going to do things to bring out that mental instability? And then she was posting on Facebook about the food share and how she had all this food at the food share. And then I found out that the people at the food share were saying things about me and saying I was mentally unwell. Well, I was a victim. I was a victim. And I just posted on the Facebook page what happened. But you're not allowed to do that uncensored as well. So the Cemetery Junction Facebook page, you're not allowed to post the bad things that happen in Cemetery Junction. That'll be deleted. They only want to hear about the nice things, about this gas tower in Cemetery Junction. If you go to the Cemetery Junction Facebook page, they'll tell you about this gas tower. And then so she texted me. She said that she's going to take me to court for slander because I slandered her, and she was going to let the judge decide. I mean, this woman doesn't even know what slander is, because if you're going to sue somebody for slander, you have to prove that you were injured by being slandered. And I never slandered that woman. I just said on Facebook, people are not going because of rudeness and gossip. And I found out some things that people were saying about me. That's all I said. I never slandered her. That is not slander. And so she said she's going to take me to court and sue me for slander. And she doesn't even know what slander is. And another thing is that slander is a civil offense. It's not a criminal offense. She said she was going to have to get the police on me. And she said she was going to have the police sort me and one other person out. Well, slander is a civil offense. It's not a criminal offense. And I know that because I have been slandered. I was slandered by my former employer, Foster Wheeler. And I phoned the police because I wanted Foster Wheeler to be responsible for what they did to me. But of course, they've never been responsible. And the police just said it's a civil matter. It's not a criminal matter. They said if we were going to get involved in slander, then and they just said it's civil, it's not criminal. And so this woman said she was going to have the police sort me and one other person out. And then me and my boyfriend were scared because I don't want to get sectioned again. Because the thing is once you've been given a diagnosis of a mental illness, they won't leave you alone. CMHT will not leave you alone. And so we phoned the police, explained to the police what happened, and the police said that there were not any problems, that I hadn't committed any offense, but if that woman made a complaint about me, that I might have to make a statement. And I've got the text messages on my phone where that woman said she was going to sue me, and that woman said she was going to have the police sort me and one other person out. I have the text messages on my phone as evidence of what this Christian texted me. And so my boyfriend, he went and told the operations manager, but was anything done? No. And then so we don't go to that food share anymore. And then after all that happened, that's when I found out that this woman was actually in the warehouse, going into the warehouse, looking in my direction and saying that I'm mentally unstable. If that's the truth, if that's how she felt, then why is she doing things to bring out the mental instability? And then the most recent thing that happened, because I've been thinking about making this video for a while now, and I wasn't going to make it, but now what the gossip is my boyfriend is my carer. That's the new gossip. My boyfriend is my carer. And that's what the operations manager said, because the operations manager told my boyfriend that because he has to take care of me, that he's got some really unique skills to be able to do that. And I just said, is that what they think of me? You know, I wish it was true. I wish he was my carer, because then he could get a carer's allowance. That's about £60 a week. And so he could get £60 a week for not doing much of anything. Yeah, I wish it was true. But that's the new rumor going around in Cemetery Junction. This rumor has been started by the people at Wycliffe Baptist Church, is that my boyfriend is my carer, and he has to have really special skills to take care of me. And I just said, is that what they think of me? Well, that is what they think of me. They think that I'm in such a state that I need a carer. Well, I'll tell you, I'm working my 14 hours a week, which is what I'm allowed to do, and I'm studying data science. I'm making videos. I cook dinner almost every day. I wash clothes. I clean the apartment. I wash dishes, iron clothes. Sometimes I'm just exhausted, you know, and sometimes I do feel like an unpaid carer sometimes, but I've got enough decorum not to verbalize how I feel. And that's what people at Wycliffe Baptist Church think of me. They think that, you know, I'm just really hard to get along with, and I'm mentally unstable, and my boyfriend is my carer, and he has to have lots of skills to take care of me. And I do wish it was true. I wish it was true, because sometimes I'm exhausted after studying, working, fixing dinner, washing dishes, doing the laundry, cleaning my apartment, ironing my clothes, shopping, going into town, going to food handout, shopping. I, Sometimes I'm exhausted and I have to lay down and take a nap out of sheer exhaustion. So I wish it was true. I wish he was my carer and I could just kick back and take it easy, and he could do everything and get his £60 a week carer's allowance. So that's what prompted this video. I was really upset. I was upset last night because that's what they think of me. And not only do they think that of me, they're repeating it and they're telling people. And the woman who I hold responsible for this is this woman, Kay, because she actually was saying things about me to the operations manager to give him that idea. And she was actually going to speak to the operations manager about me to try to cause trouble for me. And I said, well, I don't want any trouble, so I'm just not going to come back. Well, she didn't care. She didn't care if I didn't come back because she was going around saying things about me anyway. But she said that she was just sad that she didn't get to see my boyfriend anymore. So she didn't give a toss if I didn't go. She was just upset that my boyfriend wasn't going. So what does that tell you? So I think I've just pretty much exhausted this video. I've just told you what I think about this video, and just to let you know that all of these examples I've given you on this sheet of paper, and I'll tick off Wycliffe now. Churches are not safe havens. They're not places where you can find any kind of safety or security or anything like that. I've given you this sheet of paper that I've written down all of these examples, and I wasn't even going to make this video, but I decided, when now the rumor at Wycliffe Baptist Church going around is that my boyfriend has to take care of me, I thought, well, this is it. I'm making this video. So that concludes my video. I'm not going to ask you to like, subscribe, and share on this video because this was a very personal video, but I just felt that I wanted to make it just to clear the air and say how I feel. And I'll be making a tarot video soon as well, but I've been thinking about making this video for a while now. And then after the newest rumor is that my boyfriend is my carer, I thought, well, I better make this video and just say how I feel about it, that I don't feel that churches are any kind of place where you can find any kind of safety. And even my boyfriend, he's had his own bad experiences with church about people saying things about him, but he can make his own video on his own YouTube account if he wants to. If he wants to make it on my YouTube account, he can, but he has a YouTube account. So thank you so much for listening to my video. And at least I've been able to clear the air and say what I think about churches not being places of any kind of safety. And I hope you have a better experience with churches than I did. Goodbye.